guys, this is dietitian Monica. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I interviewed Dr. Mark Ratner. He is the chief officer at Theralogics, and we talked a lot about Ovasitol for women with PCOS to help improve insulin sensitivity. And we also talked about berberine and the link between berberine and GLP-1, which is what is found in medications like Ozempic and Mounjaro and Wegovy, which are very popular these days for weight loss and for different things like that. So I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did. Dr. Ratner is, as you will see, a wealth of knowledge in both of these and in the fertility, insulin sensitivity sphere. So again, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and on to the episode. Well, thank you so much for being here, Dr. Ratner. I've been really excited to interview you, especially around Ovasitol. It's something that I've used with my clients in the past, and I've heard that Bobby described it as your baby. So I'm excited to hear more about what you have to say about that. Yeah, so to get started, would you mind sharing a little bit more about you, like who you are, what you do, and
Sure.
how you created Theralogics?
Yeah. So I'm a physician, and I'm by training, I'm a board certified urologist, and I stopped seeing patients in practice about 5 years ago. But when I was in practice, primarily I did male fertility.
Okay.
So I worked with one of the biggest IVF practices in the country. And over the years, even though my specialty was male fertility, infertility treatment is really, it's a couple's, issue. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you invariably are going to learn a lot about the fertility issues that affect both of the partners.
Mm-hmm.
My background happens to be that before I went to medical school, I did a master's in nutrition years ago, obviously, at Cornell. And so actually Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who most dietitians are familiar with, he was a young guy then, and I took his course, although he was not yet the plant-based guru. But nevertheless, I got my master's. I went to medical school. I then ended up in practice outside here of Washington, D.C. Honestly, I forgot about nutrition. I mean, I was busy in practice, and nutrition wasn't sort of uppermost in my mind. And then what happened about 24 years ago, right around 2000, 2001, there were some really interesting papers published about the impact of specific nutrients on the risk of prostate cancer. Exciting research. And, I had this background in nutrition, and this sounded very familiar to me, all of this stuff that they were writing about. And it occurred to me that this was good science, but it was a pretty bad industry. The dietary supplement industry really is not a lot of reliable stuff out there, especially 23 years ago. So we started a company, and what we decided to do was recruit a medical advisory board, because we really wanted to focus on the science. We wanted to make sure that the science really drove the formulation of our products. For academicians, for physicians and scientists who are in university or academic practices, what's most important to them is their reputation. And so we recruited, we started out with 3 physicians, 1 PhD, all of whom were full-time faculty at various medical schools, mostly here in the Mid-Atlantic. And we formulated our first product. The other thing that we did at the outset, because we really wanted to make sure that we were a reliable source of good clinical interventions, we decided we would have every one of our products independently content certified through a nonprofit third party. And from day one, that's been what we've done. We use an agency which is up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's called NSF International. It used to be part of the University of Michigan. It's now a freestanding nonprofit. And they've got an independent dietary supplement certification program because, unfortunately, the FDA doesn't do a particularly thorough job of policing the industry. So there's really very little guarantee that what's printed on the bottle label is actually going to be inside the bottle. And there's all kinds of crazy claims that get made for products. And the FDA is just seriously outgunned, is really what the story is. The industry just kind of runs right over them. And so we use this agency, NSF International. It's up in Ann Arbor. They content certify everything that we do. And again, it's a nonprofit, independent third-party program. So that was what we did. We started back in 2002. We started out in the urology world, and then we pretty quickly morphed into fertility. And started in male fertility, ended up then obviously going into female fertility. And about 8 years ago, you brought up earlier Ovasitol, which is our inositol supplement. About 8 years ago, there were some really interesting studies published in European journals. Most of this research was being done in Italy, Germany, looking at the benefit of inositols in the treatment of PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome. And there were a couple of products being sold in Europe, nothing here in the States. So we launched a product. It's called Ovasitol, content certified. And it is an inositol supplement. And when we launched about 8 years ago, this product, we work very closely with many of the biggest fertility programs in the country. It's actually a little bit north of 70% of the fertility practices in the country use our product, prenatals, one or more of our products by about 70% of these practices. So we started talking to docs here in the U.S. about inositols and PCOS, and we got just a lot of blank stares. I mean, people would look at us like we had just sort of landed from outer space. Never heard of it. And we came to call this NIH syndrome, which we said stood for not invented here. They hadn't read about this in a journal published in the United States. Most of them didn't read journals that were published in Europe. And so it took us a while to kind of gain traction with this product and with this approach to PCOS. And now, when we started 8 years ago, we were the first. If you go on Amazon now, there's probably a good 25 or 30 products that are somewhat similar.
Do you think at the time too, it was just like the lack of awareness around PCOS too?
Well, it's a very good question. PCOS, unfortunately, still is a condition that is poorly served by the medical community. Women with PCOS, unfortunately, fall, as they say, through the cracks. Okay, it's been estimated that at least half of women with PCOS don't even know it. They have never been given a formal diagnosis. And then the issue is, who can they turn to for effective treatment? And the problem really, I think, boils down to that it's not a simple condition to treat. It takes a really multidisciplinary approach. You need to bring in, if you're a physician, if you're an OBGYN, chances are, if you're in a community practice, you're busy, busy, busy. You're seeing patients every 10 or 15 minutes. You're bouncing from one exam room to the next. You got somebody in labor in the hospital. It's like I never understood how OBGYNs survive in practice. It's so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And PCOS requires a more holistic approach, a more multidisciplinary approach. You need to bring in nutrition. You need to bring in a registered dietitian. You need to bring in sometimes dermatology. You sometimes need to, to have endocrinology involved. It requires a very sort of careful approach. And without speaking too ill of my colleagues, it doesn't fit the model of current practice in many instances. In the fertility world, if a woman is trying to conceive, and she ends up going to an IVF clinic, an IVF practice, a fertility practice, they focus on fertility. Okay. Their job, get you pregnant. Okay. They like to do IVF. Okay. Or IUI. And then once you're pregnant, it's like, okay, back to your OB. All right. But PCOS is lifelong, It increases your risk of type 2 diabetes, of heart disease, stroke. It's a significant metabolic issue for women that lasts their whole life. So there's been sort of an inability for many women to find the kind of approach and assistance that they need.
Yeah. And you were just mentioning, like type 2 diabetes and PCOS. So I know that inositol can help with all of that too. Do you want to speak a little bit more to that?
Sure.
And again, with like postpartum, as I was hearing as well.
You said postpartum?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, so the interesting thing about PCOS is that for many women, not every woman with PCOS, but for most, the underlying, what we say, pathophysiology, that means sort of like the underlying derangement in their body's biochemistry, is a condition that's called insulin resistance. And insulin resistance means their pancreas, which makes insulin, is fine. Okay, it's making plenty of insulin, but their cells don't respond to the insulin. And one of the treatments for PCOS that physicians often will use, and for 40 years, this is a prescription drug that's been around. It's called metformin. Okay. And metformin's a great drug. It's safe generally. It's effective. Okay. And it's what's called an insulin sensitizer. It makes the cells more sensitive so that they do respond to the insulin. The problem with metformin is it's pretty hard to tolerate. 20-25% of people who start on it to get a prescription and start taking it have to stop because it causes quite a bit of GI, stomach upset. Okay. But it's an insulin sensitizer, and it will help improve insulin action so that insulin resistance decreases. What happens to women with PCOS is when they have insulin resistance, because the insulin is not working well at the cellular level, the pancreas cranks out extra insulin. Okay. And so they end up with very high levels of insulin in their blood. Okay. Much higher than it's supposed to be. And what happens when that insulin gets into the ovary, the bloodstream, everything goes through all the organs. And when the blood goes through the ovary, if there's a lot of insulin in it, the ovary responds by making testosterone. Okay. And so that's what causes women with PCOS to have facial hair, acne, and sometimes male pattern baldness. They'll lose hair on top of their head. It's the excess testosterone. So it's sort of a chain reaction, which starts with insulin resistance. And so if we can increase the cell's sensitivity to insulin, we're going to reverse most of those things. And that's what inositols do. Inositols actually serve as what we call the second messengers for the insulin receptor. Every one of the cells in our body has a receptor on the surface where insulin can bind to the cell and make the cell use glucose, burn glucose for energy. But in order for that to happen, that receptor, that insulin receptor, releases what we call second messengers into the cell. And those second messengers are made of inositol.
Oh.
So that's why if we can rebalance the ratio of inositols, it turns out that women with PCOS, the reason for their insulin resistance is that there's two main types of inositol, what we call myo-inositol and D-chiroinositol. And if the ratio is not right, the insulin receptor doesn't work and you get insulin resistance. So by supplementing these women, we can rebalance the ratio and improve the insulin sensitivity. So that's how inositols work. They're safe. I mean, inositols are what we call sugar alcohols. We get a bunch of it in our diet. It's in fruits and vegetables, okay? It's totally safe. And unlike metformin, which has to stop once you get pregnant, inositols can continue during pregnancy. And in fact, if you have a woman has PCOS and gets pregnant, her risk for what we call gestational diabetes is triple, 300% higher. That's the kind of diabetes that happens during pregnancy. And if you stay on inositols, once you get pregnant, if you have PCOS, it cuts that risk in half.
Wow. That's
awesome. A bunch of studies have done to show that. Yeah. So it's a great intervention, and it's caught on in a big way.
Yeah. I mean, that's important too, because we know that if you have gestational diabetes, your risk for having diabetes after pregnancy goes up.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And your risk for preterm labor, preterm delivery, goes up. Gestational diabetes, diabetes of pregnancy is a pretty serious issue. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to ask too, with the ovaries and the testosterone, is that one of the reasons why there's fertility issues too with women with
Absolutely. Yeah. So what happens in the ovary is when the testosterone level goes up, there's another thing that happens in the ovary, and that is, and I don't want to get too deeply into the biochemistry here, but remember I said there's two different inositols, right? There's myo-inositol and D-chiroinositol. And the ratio has to be proper in the ovary for everything to work right, okay? When the ratio is out of whack in the ovary, typically what's happening is the myo is too low and the D-chiro is too high. And it turns out that not only produces testosterone, but the myo-inositol is the second messenger for FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. So what makes you ovulate, the hormone that produces ovulation is called FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. And like insulin, it requires a second messenger to do its job. And just like insulin, the second messenger is made of an inositol. So when the myo-inositol in the ovary is too low, which is what happens in PCOS, not only do you get this excess testosterone production, but you also get impaired FSH signaling. In other words, the follicle stimulating hormone doesn't do its job like it's supposed to. And so you end up with poor egg quality, and missed or absent periods. Yeah.
Yeah. So switching gears a little bit too, with Ovasitol can also help with weight loss in some way, right? Because of the insulin sensitivity.
Yeah. I mean, the studies with that there are studies that show weight loss, but these days, anything that is not the kind of weight loss that people can get with the GLP-1 agonists, people are like, well, that's not really weight loss. 30 pounds, that's weight loss, right? But yes, if you improve insulin sensitivity, and that's the way the GLP-1s work, partly, okay? Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, those work in very interesting ways, multiple ways. One of the ways is, yes, they improve insulin sensitivity because they're really diabetes drugs, right? They're drugs for type 2 diabetes, where what's happening in type 2 diabetes? Insulin resistance. That's what is the underlying problem in type 2 diabetes. And so these drugs, the GLP-1 drugs, they improve insulin sensitivity, like inositols, but nothing works as strongly as those drugs do. Like berberine, another good example, okay? Berberine's a supplement. It's found in a bunch of different fruits and vegetables. But you can get it as a supplement. And some very clever marketing guy about a year ago, I don't know where this was first published, but they said berberine is nature's Ozempic, okay?
Saw that, yeah.
Which is a little bit misleading, okay? What berberine can do, okay, is, GLP-1, that's a hormone. And our body makes GLP-1 naturally in the lining of the intestine. After a meal, the intestinal lining produces GLP-1. And what does GLP-1 do? It makes you feel full, so you don't want to eat anymore. It makes your stomach emptying slow down, and intestinal peristalsis slows down so that, you feel full, right? But the other thing that GLP-1 drugs do, and this is really interesting because they don't really understand how, it works at the brain level. Okay. There's all these articles about people who were sort of compulsive overeaters. They stop overeating, but other compulsive behaviors seem to respond as well. So people who have been compulsive gamblers or compulsive drinkers or have other types of addictions, the GLP-1s, these drugs seem to help with it. Now, the difference between the body's natural GLP-1, okay, and these drugs is that natural GLP-1, which we make in our intestine, the half-life is like minutes, okay? The body breaks it down very quickly. Yeah. The GLP-1 drugs, the half-life is like a week, okay? They stick around for a long time in the system once you get an injection. That's why you take the Ozempic injections once a week, right? Now, where does berberine fit in? What berberine does, berberine increases the body's natural production of that GLP-1 hormone. So that's why that clever guy said, oh, it's nature's Ozempic. But you know what? I mean, yes. And actually, berberine is very interesting. It's been used in traditional Chinese medicine for like thousands of years. And what was it used for? It was used to treat diarrhea, okay, in traditional Chinese medicine, because it slows down the stomach's emptying and it slows down the gut, okay? So it does increase GLP-1, but the body's natural GLP-1.
Yeah, so not at the same, also with the medications that we see out there right now, the dosages are really high compared to what we would normally produce.
You mean of the GLP-1 agonist drugs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so here's the point. We have receptors in our brain, in our stomach, in our intestine. We have receptors for this GLP-1 hormone. We make the hormone in our body, and it binds to those receptors, okay? But the natural hormone that we make, the GLP-1 hormone that we make, the body breaks it down in just minutes, okay? It's what we say, the half-life is very short, okay? Yeah. The drugs, the GLP-1 agonist drugs, they are synthetic molecules that are designed to bind to that same receptor, but they bind much more tightly, and they stick around for a week, days long half-life instead of just minutes. So that's why they work so much better. Yeah. But berberine is safe, and it's sort of an alternative, and a lot of women with PCOS will combine inositols and berberine together. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great combination too, because it helps with both the insulin sensitivity and also the feeling of fullness and cravings and all of those.
Right, for sure.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, is there anything else you wanted to add today? Like I was mostly excited about the Ovasitol conversation and berberine and how berberine and the whole like GLP-1 conversation and how it's a much different conversation. Like it's not like a real GLP-1 agonist medication. But it does have its merits and it is a very supportive supplement for people trying to
The amazing, there is a ton of research that's been published using berberine, and the effects of berberine go beyond insulin sensitization. It improves cardiac function. It reduces mortality in individuals who have congestive heart failure. I mean, the studies, it's an anti-inflammatory, it's an antioxidant as well.
Yeah.
But the data on berberine is pretty impressive. It really is. I mean, one of the issues also, though, is, there's just parenthetically here, there's a lot of companies making berberine, and this sort of circles back to this whole question of certification. A study was published. This was actually published in 2018, when berberine was still not quite as popular as it is now. I think they went out and purchased something like 18 different berberines that were available online. And they found that something like 80% of them didn't contain anywhere near the amount of berberine they claimed they did. That study was repeated by an industry study was done. They bought it on Amazon. They bought 32 berberine products on Amazon. This was just about 8-9 months ago. And they had them independently content analyzed. 20% of the products they tested had no berberine at all. So it's buyer beware, because there's a lot of, like we said at the beginning, a lot of very bad supplement companies out there. It's so unregulated. It's kind of crazy. Yeah.
And I mean, that makes their logics different in many ways, is that you do the third-party testing and that you make sure that your product.
Yeah, I mean, that's been what we've done from day one. And it's especially important because our products are used by so many fertility clinics. During a reproductive time frame, you want to know not only that you're getting proper dosing, but that there's no contaminants, nothing adulterating it. That's really important. And in the drug, if you're a drug manufacturer, that kind of testing is absolutely required by the FDA. The supplement industry is kind of on its honor. It's like, the FDA just says, please make sure that your products are pure and that you're delivering what you say you are. And if the company gets inspected by the FDA, they are supposed to have paperwork to show that, yes, look, we did this testing and here it is. Except there's like 6 people in the FDA to police like a $30 billion industry, right? It's sort of a joke. Yeah. So we do it sort of, we basically have put our products in the hands of the medical advisory board in terms of formulation, and then also the independent content certification. Yeah.
Yeah. I was also going to say earlier, this, with Ovasitol and berberine and the supplements, they're more like nutraceuticals, would you say? Or
are they what?
Are they also considered nutraceuticals? Are they the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, nutraceuticals, the term nutraceutical is, again, something that some very clever marketing guy probably came up with about 15 years ago. It's gotten so widely used at this point that people pretty much know what it means, okay? It's a nutrition-based, they're trying to imply that it's a pharmaceutical, a drug, okay? And that's why they take nutra and ceutical, right? And they've created this word. Technically, these, from a regulatory perspective, these products are dietary supplements. The FDA considers them in the same category as food. It's the Food and Drug Administration, right? And so they're not drugs. They haven't gone through the drug approval process that the FDA requires before something can be a prescription drug. Technically, they're like foods. The regulation is spotty at best. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
And so with that too, what I was going to say was that with these supplements, so it sounds like more like, yeah, they're good for some things, but they also are really impactful for these other things. Whereas from what I understand, a lot of the time with more potent pharmaceuticals, like it almost seems like they help you, but they also have all these side effects. It feels like with berberine and inositols a lot of the time, all the time, like they are helping you with infertility, but they're also helping you with insulin sensitivity and weight management. So it almost seems like they might not be as like strong at first, but they seem to have more of like a wider range of like things that they help with.
A benefit. Yeah, I mean, the thing about inositols is that they serve many functions in the body. We said they not only are the second messengers for the insulin receptor, but also FSH, right? Turns out also thyroid stimulating, the thyroid receptors, okay, the receptors in the thyroid gland for what we call thyroid stimulating hormone, okay, are inositol based. So there are studies now looking at the use of inositols in patients with low thyroid function. There are studies that have shown that inositols, because they cross into the brain, can help with anxiety. Now, those studies have used way higher doses. And the inositols that we use in Ovasitol, our product, is 4 grams per day. So it's a powder, and each packet or one scoop from a canister is 2 grams, and you do that twice a day. You mix it with water, okay? But yeah, no, I mean, they are, properly used. They are absolutely safe, well tolerated, and have several potential benefits. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ratner. This was very informative, very helpful for me, and I know that for all the people that are going to be watching this. So again, thank you for it.
Well, thank you for having me, and it was really a pleasure chatting with you. And feel free to give me a call if you have any further questions.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Hi guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that again as much as I did. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. You can always also DM me over on my Instagram at Dietitian Monica. And as always, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And make sure you share this video with any other people, women, especially with PCOS, that you think would benefit from this. I also wanted to ask you guys what you want to learn more about, what you want me to talk more about, or people you want me to interview. So if you have any cool ideas or any interesting topics that you want me to cover, please let me know. And as always, I'll see you next time. Bye. Okay, one last thing. If you are interested in Ovasitol, you will find the link below, and you can also get 15% off using my unique code that I have also shared with you guys below. I will also share it here. It's 675763. So you make sure you just put it in at checkout. It's the PRC code that is required on the checkout page, and I hope it helps you guys.